go ahead and entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We do not have any presentations tonight. Consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the City Council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the agenda and considered in normal sequence. Tonight we have two items. We have 5 Alpha, which is the City Council minutes for August 12th, 2019, and 5 Bravo, which is the resolution approving disbursements through August 26th, 2019. I have been informed that we do have a change for 5 Alpha. On the miscellaneous portion, there was Councilmember Huntington's remarks regarding the MRF-PUC rate study and also the MRF-PUC 2020 budget were not indicated, so we're going to go ahead and pull that for the time being for the purpose of this vote. So I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 5 Alpha at this time.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Now we'll go back to 5 Bravo, or 5 Alpha, which is the City Council meeting minutes, August 12th, 2019. I'd like to go ahead and recommend that we add Councilmember Huntington's remarks and then approve accordingly.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Could we be clear what those are? Just refresh my
The
memory.
2020 budget for MRF-PUC and the rate study for MRF-PUC.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. So City Clerk, please make sure that we have those remarks added for Councilmember Huntington. Thank you. Public comment. Public comment provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign up in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves by providing a name and address. We have nobody on the sheet tonight. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to address City Council? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. We do not have any public hearings scheduled for tonight, so we'll move right into our regular agenda. And the first item on the docket is 8 Alpha, the 2020 preliminary budget discussion. City Administrator approval.
Mayor Hague, members of the City Council, before you tonight is the 2020 preliminary budget discussion. This is the preliminary to the actual preliminary that will be held on September 9th. So what we want to get, personnel and budget have worked over the 2020 budget. We want to just give City Council the first taste of what this is going to look like. We're looking for any feedback, comments that you may have about the budget. If so needed, we'll schedule another personnel budget committee meeting between now and September 9th. But otherwise, we're planning on adopting or proposing an adoption of the preliminary levy for 2020 on that September 9th meeting. If for whatever reason we need to postpone that to the next meeting, we sure can. So with that, I'll turn it over to Finance Director Dowd, and he can kind of go over the 2020 preliminary budget.
Director Dowd, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm going to go over the 2020 budget discussion. Again, we're not approving anything tonight, just trying to get feedback from everybody in the council so that we're all on the same page going into that September 9th date. So hitting on some big points here, we'll go over the summary portions first, and then we'll get to the tax levy numbers and tax impact numbers and so on and so forth. If at any point you have any questions, just stop me and I'll answer questions as we go through. The general fund budget summary overall, the biggest changes are there's a change in allocation of the community development director. Currently it is a 75-25 split, EDA 75%, city 25%. And then we are switching that over to have a 50-50 split between the city and the EDA. Our goal is to have the EDA free more money to do more economic development items, and the city take on a little more responsibility for the stuff that she's doing with community development, of whether that's permits and whatever else that she's handling within the city. So We feel like it's 50-50 split is pretty good. We'd like to keep moving forward and in future use to get 100% so that she's no longer taken care of by the EDA, but taken care of by the city. And then the EDA can use their money to economic develop the city overall. So that's the ultimate goal, but that is a few years down the road. Currently, it's currently 75-25, moving to 50-50 in 2020. Change in operations based on current work scenarios. That is basically number 6 on the docket here, which relates to streets and parks. Remember in 2019, we combined streets and parks to be one department to make it a little better scenario for everyone above in management, easier to manage. So we, based on current work scenarios along with the need of an additional employee, that additional employee is a cost of $73,150 for the city, based on what we have in there for the budget, and that does include benefits as well. That's total cost. Otherwise, change in operations and items needed for the overall operation of the city, just needs of what we need in the streets and parks area, like to keep up with the streets maintenance and stuff like that as much as possible so that we're not falling behind any more than we already are, that we were in the past, I should say. Otherwise, conservative revenue numbers, so we brought it back our numbers from what we thought might have been in 2019. So we maybe been a little aggressive for the 2019 revenue numbers that we put up there for building permits and some other miscellaneous revenues that we may have gotten in the past, may not have gotten in this year. Whether that's just moving those to different funds or putting those into different areas or just not getting them overall. But pulling those numbers back to be more conservative will allow us to be more accurate on the back end of things with taxes and stuff, because the tax number is basically the number that comes out after you take all the revenues and then unsold expenses. The number that we get for taxes is going to be the difference between those two. So it's just to make a balanced budget overall. So the tax number is just derived based on what we have for revenues and what we have for expenditures. So if we take away some revenue numbers based on what we think we're going to get, instead of being too low on numbers, we'll be hopefully right on, which is what our goal is, and then we won't have any shortfall when it comes to the end of the year. So if we do overestimate revenues, we only have so much dollars for taxes, and if we don't hit those revenue numbers, then we're shortfalling at the end of the year in the general fund, which is our operations fund. Like I mentioned on every quarter 2 report, we've been pretty close to where we are normally, and we want to keep going with that in 2020 as well. Yes. Questions?
So, I'm gonna ask this, Jasper, and I just want to clarify because I know that we're looking at May of 2019. It's not the end of the second quarter numbers.
Correct.
And on permits, I'm struggling with the idea that we wouldn't be better than where we were at this time in 2018 with the amount of building and permits that have been pulled for. There's all kinds of things going on in town.
Agreed. So we may have been better than we were in 2018. So even the numbers right now you're looking at may have been better than they were in 2018. But going into the 2019 year, we didn't know what a full year would look like having a full building official in-house. So we took basically a guess of an educated guess of what we thought it would be. So now adjusting back those a little bit is kind of our conservative aspect to go. I think we had 100,000. Was that right, Jasper? 100,000. That sounds pretty close to what we had there. And we had pulled it back to like 85 or 90 just to be more conservative on the number of building permits. That's not a huge drop, but if we guess 100,000 and come in at 85, we're going to be $15,000 shortfall. Whereas if I guess 85 and we're at 90, I'm going to have a $5,000 excess in the general fund. So I know we're looking at May 2019 numbers. I do want to address that Jasper did bring that to my attention, but I didn't want to make too many confusions with numbers up here that don't match numbers on your paper. So we will have those to the September 9th meeting though. So you can look at halfway through the year, where are we at halfway through the year to make it easier math.
I still think we're being conservative with it. I think that, which is good. I mean, that's fine.
If I could most certainly pull, if you're concerned with building permits or so, I could pull them as of today or as of the end of July, so they have the most recent numbers on, and say, here's what we have end of July so far. At September 9th, I may have end of August numbers for building permits. If that's the one you're concentrated on, which is fine, I could pull that number for you and say, here's what it is through the end of August, which may surprise you that it might not be more than what you think.
I was a major proponent for having the on board that we have. So the truth is that we still have the push rush that's going to happen, that happens in construction before snow flies, and then you have all of the work that the contractors push off wanting to have outside work to do the inside work, so there's still.
There is, yep. So one way to look at it too is if we take a conservative approach now, and if we feel that numbers are too low or we are being too conservative later on, after the preliminary levy is adopted in September, we can always raise that revenue number, which would in turn lower the tax number that we're gonna, that we would approve at the December 10th meeting. So we are able to lower the tax levy at any time after the September 9th meeting that's the planned approval, but we're not able to increase it. So if I take a less conservative number into building permits going into September 9th, then if it's actually true when it comes through in October when people are pushing, then we are stuck.
Right.
So I'd rather be conservative in now, and then if building permits come in great, then I can raise that number and say, okay, we're gonna be at 100,000 next year, that's what our plan is gonna be. So then I can lower that tax number as well by that $15,000.
Administrative approval, is there something?
I was gonna say pretty much the same thing. We don't wanna, the preliminary levy gives us, we've drawn our best guess. By the time we see the final levy in December, we should really know what's going on. There's a couple wild cards out there, regarding the economy and things like that we wanna keep an eye on. We don't wanna overestimate our revenues, which can get us into trouble, as Zach indicated. So, if we hit above what our revenue projections are for those permits, I think it's a good thing, at the end of the year. But if we don't, then it kind of gets us into trouble.
And the thing that I'd like to add from a personnel and budget committee perspective is that our team, we transitioned, if you recall, from where we had a contracted building official for so many years within the city on the sewer to where in 2019 we actually had our full-time official. So to Jasper's, or to our city administrator's point about the best guesstimation of things of that nature, that in fact is a reality, because we had really no clue 100% what was going to be happening when we went with the 100% full-time employee. So this 2019 was sort of a learning year, and now I think we're in a better position to go ahead and budget accordingly based off what we've learned in 2019, correct?
Correct, yeah, that's basically what we did. I believe that should be any other questions on the general fund overall. Do the next one, the overall. Next one, okay. Okay, perfect. Community center fund. So this is another fund that affects our taxes. So I'm going to do only the funds that affect our taxes. And I'll touch base on the debt funds, which are something that are out of our control. So the community center fund, the big things that happened overall are that at least we're looking at for 2020 budget so far is an increase in pool salaries. So in the past, we've not had the pool open very many hours, or it's been odd hours from what we've learned through operations, at least I've learned so far being here full time. Then we had the pool open odd hours or closed for an hour or whatever, based on Rich's, our public services director's direction, is that he'd like to have it open more hours, and so is Allison, our recreation manager there at the community center. So they'd have them open more hours. In order to be open more hours, we have to increase those pool salaries so that we have adequate staff on hand for those. So that's about an increase in from 19 to 20. So that's a pretty big increase in the overall community center.
And
Yes.
I'm guessing that the thought is that we're going to be able to.
So we're basically inflating numbers, just using inflation over a year. That includes salaries, things, that includes costs of services. That's just overall costs of business for the community center. A 3% increase, in my eyes, is very reasonable for an increase over year, especially if you take into consideration those are salaries as well, which are on a step grade current system with get a step every year your anniversary comes around, along with the cost of living adjustment that happens at the beginning of the year as well. So overall, I thought that was a very minimal increase for activities at the community center. That is the main changes that happened. We were, pretty close with charges for services. That charges for service number is very high, 725. Again, that does include community education items. So anything that goes through our office that is community ed related goes through the revenue line item of charges for services, but is then put through as an expense on the administrative and general line item as well. So at 591,000, you take away, I'll use an approximate number, about 350,000 of that is going to be community ed stuff. So you had about 241,000 of administrative and general, and then again you take away 350,000 of that 725 number, and you're right around 375 for the year. So if you take those two numbers out, again, the gross together or they net together to be zero, but they just make our numbers look a little higher than what they normally would be for other items like just memberships or something. Any questions on the community center fund? Hearing none. On to the next one, EDA. So the only reason I put this one up here is because it does have to do with taxes, and it's a fund that we operate with taxes. In 2016 was the first year we implemented an EDA fund levy. The reason why we implemented that is so that it would break away from the general fund levy, and that if there was ever any tax limits put on by the state of Minnesota, the EDA levy is exempt from that, and they are capped at 0.01083% of the total tax market value of the city. Really complicated formula, but that's what the state of Minnesota said you can max out at. So we max that out. That's what we've done that every year since we implemented the EDA levy, is that if we have a market value increase, we'll just increase our tax amount that we're able to do, our taxable value that we're able to do for the EDA, so that we have economic development money to do economic development items within the city, and not limit those with the general fund if the tax levy limit were ever to come in place for the state of Minnesota. This year is the first year we're having a balanced budget. Again, that has to do somewhat with the increase in taxes, which is about $8,000 for the EDA. It's not a ton of money, but it is something. Pardon me. But the other part has to do with the fact that we're moving the community development director from 75-25 to 50-50, which incorporates about $30,000 of salary and benefit for the community development director. So moving that off of the EDA helps us out get a balanced budget in the EDA, which is the first time it's happened in about 5 years, which is very good in my eyes to have a balanced budget for the EDA. It means our revenues are meeting our expenses and not the other way around. Any questions about the EDA? All right, hearing none. CIP, CEP. So this has to do with their tax levy as well. I'm not sure if you want to touch base on this, Jasper, or do you want me to do it? Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, if I may, I'll touch base on this, since this kind of lives in the administration, mostly public services world, for some of these things. We have a pretty extensive list. Again, this year, the total projected is just under $1.3 million in capital projects. What we're projecting for carryover from 2019 into 2020 is $504,000. So that helps, and that's kind of the beauty of the capital fund that we have, is that if we don't use it for capital expenses, and let's say items come in a little cheaper than what we thought they were going to, that money just automatically carries over for future capital costs. So in that just under $1.3 million that we have allocated for 2020, 504 of that is coming from previous years, and we had a pretty significant carryover from 18 to 19, and again from 19 to 20. One of those items is the TAP sidewalk project. That was one of the big carryovers from 18 to 19, and the cost of that came in a little bit under what we had in the actual budget itself. So really, for this is broken out, and this is very high level. This is just to get some numbers into our levy projection formula. But really, our administration, that department, there isn't anything new. It's just paying the capital lease stuff that we've done this year. The airport, there's a big project out there, taxiway extension project with utilities. The airport commission directed and provided direction that they believe that we should have utilities out at the airport for this taxi lane extension project. What we're going to do is reach out to the EDA, because there's potentially an FBO, a fixed base operator, to operate out there, and having utilities would be beneficial to somebody who wants to run a business out there. So we're looking for some participation with the EDA. So the EDA in the near future will have a conversation. I believe we're going to reach out to the chairperson and then also the board. So that project is really contingent on EDA participation. We have some other minor things, like a pull behind finish mower out there at the airport. We hope to get some MnDOT grants for that, but if we don't, it's something that we really need, as the one that we have right now is quite old, and I think the shaft that drives the mower itself broke. A bearing blew out of it, and we have to get it custom made because they no longer make parts for it. So we're at that level with that type of thing for our large mower out there. For the fire department, this is capital lease payments for the next 7 years for the things that we purchased this year: grass rig, transport vehicle. I know we have turnout gear on there for this year, and some pagers as well. So those items are on there. We get some supplementation of those from the townships through their payments as well. So the library, we have an air conditioner replacement over there for $5,000. We maintain that building. It's actually city owned but occupied by the library, who's part of a consortium, county consortium. So it's just something that we do to have a library in the community. The police department, nothing above and beyond normal, but we do have our squad leases in there. So our 3 leased squad vehicles, that's what it costs to have those vehicles every year. Recreation, there's quite a few things in here. We have the fitness equipment lease that we purchased with the new fitness equipment this year. Again, we have ice arena coolant, which is something that you'll see every year just to kind of have an insurance. Basically, the coolant's difficult to find, and we want to make sure we have enough in stock in case we have a leak in our compressor system. So every year we buy about $10,000 worth of coolant to keep just in case we have a system failure. The alternative is to put in a different type of coolant system, ammonia based, kind of going back to the early 1900s when they used ammonia for cooling. But now it's more efficient and less harmful for the environment. So, but a system of that nature, you'll see it in the actual full CIP, is $1 million plus. So it's something we want to make sure that our current system is going to work as long as we can. So that's why you'll see that in there every year. We have some planning items for the locker rooms, the fitness wall that we've talked about a little bit this year. We're having difficulty getting contractors to get us quotes on that. So that'll likely be pushed to next year. If not, those are some of the funds that are carried over from 2019 to 2020. If we can get it done this year and this winter or something like that, we'll do it. Otherwise, it'll be in 2020. The ice arena water heater, so that is for basically heating the water that goes into the Zamboni, having something replaced because, as most are aware, the Zamboni that we purchased, it was not performing as well as what we expected it to. So we actually had Zamboni from California fly out here, look at the machine, kind of troubleshoot it with us. They gave us a punch list of things that we could do to help with some of the ice conditioning, and one of them is getting the water hotter that's going into the machine that uses this hot water when it's resurfacing the ice. So that was one of the items that they brought up. The outdoor pool diving board. Now this is something we found a fix for that it's basically going to last one season. So it's something that if we want to have a diving board out there, we're going to need to replace it. And then the outdoor pool bath floors, those will be refinished, and then the ice arena acoustic panel. So this is something that will lessen the echo effect that you hear in the ice arena. This is something that's been requested by the youth hockey and bulldog hockey. It'll just be more helpful in being able to coach and communicate effectively. I think there's a typo on here. I think it's 12.5 it is 12.5 from the Hockey Association participation. So we've mentioned that to them. We actually had a meeting with them today, and we kind of talked about this and how that would be contingent on them raising some funds for those items. Streets and parks, we're moving the annual street maintenance projects up to $450,000 from $400,000. We are tracking that item separately, completely separate of this, because we know it's important to make sure that those funds stay into the street realm. So there's going to be a carryover from this year, and likely there's going to be a carryover from next year. But what you'll eventually see, and what City Council will have in front of them, are actual full restoration projects, reconstruction projects, things like that. And we'll tap into those funds that have carried over to help lessen the burden of those larger multi-million-dollar projects. So, I think we're going to continue to keep, and I think this is a good model, but continue to keep funding it in this nature, and then keep having carryover, and then eventually, I think our first street project that we're going to need to bond for will probably be in 2023, and at that time we should have a nice little nest egg to help lessen the impact to the tax levy for that item.
Question in regards to the streets. In 2019, when the Personnel and Budget Committee came up with the idea that we wanted to have a amount of money set aside for streets each and every year, and that number would go up, I think that we were all under the impression that that money was going to be used specifically for reconstruct type projects and for maintenance. This year alone, I think we've spent something like $16,000 on striping. I don't think that was the intent of the Personnel and Budget Committee, that we'd have that type of money being spent for things outside of the reconstruct and the general maintenance. So is it possible that this could be an item that we could probably revisit at the Personnel and Budget Committee, knowing that we have some additional costs? And now that said, $16,000 this year, typically what would the city be spending on striping, and why was it so high this year? Has it gone many years where we weren't doing the required striping?
I think there's a couple questions here. For the striping, just circling back to that one, there were a lot of areas that hadn't been striped for numerous years, and you've probably seen that. Some new, both painting of the curbs, crosswalks, things like that we did this year. We always try to do as much as far as in the last 2 years, try to do as much right before Giant Celebration, because that's when we have a lot of people in town and a lot of people using our sidewalks and streets. So the idea about the $400,000 this year, what we've run into is that the patching that we can do and that we have done, we've done as much as what we think we should do in areas. So what we're looking at doing is trying to just get everything up to where we want it to be moving forward. And if you want, we can look at possibly allocating funds specifically for striping or those types of events, and looking at that. Maybe, I don't know if using these funds or how you want to approach it, we can approach it any way we wish, but we really need to look at it holistically. We're looking at, as far as staff goes, that we were under the impression that we're looking at improving our street section from curb to curb, and whatever we need to do, we'll do to make it better and safe. But if we want to just use those funds strictly for, physical curb, gutter, that type of thing, we can look at that and have it defined in that nature if you want.
Well, I guess what I want to bring up is that when we put together the pavement management plan, and we look over the course of 40 years, we're looking at about $32 million over the course of 40 years to go ahead and maintain our streets. So I guess the question would be, what is the definition of maintaining streets? Does it include things like striping and that type of stuff? Because where we're at is that this city had spent $50,000 a year on streets for many, many years, and we all know what we have. So last year we made the decision to go ahead and start with the $400,000 and increase it an additional $50,000 each year. Because realistically, if we do the math, we're really needing somewhere around $800,000 a year to stay within our 40-year pavement management plan. So when we start having things like striping coming out of what we consider to be reconstruct or general maintenance related to streets, that could be an impact. And as far as the overall carryover from year to year, it's a fantastic idea. I think we all understand that we don't necessarily expect that each year we're going to be able to get whatever that designated number is for repair, and that some of those years are going to be carried over for larger projects and things of that nature. So that's the reason why I bring that up, is because the city has gone without adequate funds for streets for many, many years, as we all know, and we certainly are trying to do something to make sure that we can try to remedy that problem in the near term.
And definitely, and if city council members, if you're hearing things or seeing things that you think, well, this area should be done, we've likely looked at it, and one, it's too far gone to do what our normal repair is. Elmwood Circle, for example, is really close to that point where it would almost need to be completely reconstructed, and the subgrade would have to be repaired. But for the most part, we've looked at every single section of street. We've made a determination if it makes sense to do one of the major patches that you've seen around town, or if we need to get that onto a future project where we can do a little bit more than what we can with just some large patches. So I think it's well worth the discussion to make sure that we're allocating these funds how the city council feels appropriate. But with striping, as far as if it's considered maintenance, in our maintenance agreement that we have with the county, we're on the hook for striping the county roads. So it would be same with signs and things like that as well. We have a lot of signs that need to be looked at and replaced as far as retro reflectivity and things like that. There's guidelines that we have to follow to make sure our signs are in compliance as well. So when we're looking at this as a staff, we're looking at street maintenance as a whole, the whole road section from right of way line to right of way line, and making sure that we're doing everything we need to do in there. So if it's something that we should bring up at a personnel and budget or a future city council meeting, give me that direction, we can definitely do that.
Thank you. Councilmember Appleton.
I was lucky enough to spend a little time with TJ on looking at some of the streets and looking at Elmwood Circle was one of them too. And one of the first things I learned while talking with him is that in a lot of these cases, the amount of asphalt that is down was not adequate for what it needs to be, and the substrate underneath it isn't enough either. So some of these things are delaminating or falling apart because it wasn't done right the first time, which, if in the case of Elmwood Circle, it's nice to know that what they did do to patch the thing off is supposed to be good for about 3 to 5 years until we can get, you'll get 112 going through and so on. There's so much to have to do that they're going to have to go through and do patchworks that are going to be good, solid sections that are taken out and put in for what's the worst. And that's going to take a bunch of these funds first. There's no way you're going to be able to do everything that's in there and, off of the amount of money that we're putting aside for it.
And overall, we're still in the process of developing like a 10-year capital plan for our streets, and you'll likely see that towards the end of this year, we hope. But preliminarily, including our contribution to the Trunk Highway 112 project, city contribution only, the city of Sueur will likely have between $8 and $10 million of capital investment in their streets, not including this maintenance stuff, over the next 10 years. It's going to be a pretty significant investment, barring any major economic issues and things like that. So there's going to be a pretty substantial. There's a plan right now. We're waiting for bonds to fall off, so we don't have to really affect the general fund levy. If there's appetite from city council to raise taxes to put towards streets, we can do that. Zach and myself, we feel like we have a good plan to kind of balance it out, so we're not affecting the general fund levy or your tax rates in the communities. But if you want to expedite that, it basically just takes money to do that. So, but there is going to be, substantial investment or reinvestment in the infrastructure in the city in the next 10 years for our streets. So, but $10 million over 10 years. If you look at 2nd Street, that was 8 blocks. That was $2.5 million roughly, so 8 blocks for $2.5 million. You extrapolate those numbers, you're at what? 32 blocks of road for $10 million. We have, I forget what it is, 60 some miles of road in town. So there's
18.1, I think. That's what we have for city roads.
Okay, 18.1. So, it's a pretty substantial investment, but we're going to be doing a lot more than we have in the previous 10 years. And I think it's a product of what we're doing planning wise and favorable economic times where we can grow with the city. So I think as far as the pavement management plan and that allocation over 40 years, we're getting a lot better. That number really is probably unattainable unless there's some significant increases in taxes, which is nobody wants, right? So we're going to do the best we can with what we have without really affecting the tax rate.
Yeah, maybe if you could, maybe explain what the difference would be if we want, let's just say we wanted to get to that 800,000. What would it take as far as annualized tax increase to make that happen? Because basically, for every 1%, we're at about, what, $27,000?
Correct, yeah, so 800,000, that's roughly a third of our taxes. Zach's whipping on his calculator right now. But it'd be very significant increase in taxes to get up to that point.
Double digit for sure.
Oh yeah, what, 33% or something
Yeah,
like that?
it's about 30% just to do it, $800,000 a year. So again, it'd be a one-time increase, but that would put us over 100% increase or 100% tax rate in the city with it.
And then if we go ahead and subtract, let's say the 400,000, basically each of our properties are looking at an additional 15% per year just to go ahead and maintain the streets, because we're already allocating the 400 last year and now 450 for 2020.
It's about, from 350,000, it's about 13.5% increase in taxes just for the 350,000. So it's a significant increase. Again, that'd be a one-time thing. It's not going to be year over year, but that's a significant increase in taxes in this community. So.
So, if we need to revisit the annual street maintenance for those projects, we can, but we are allocating $50,000 more for that. We have an item in there for capital lease payments. We have an outdoor pickleball court in here, which we're doing a kind of pilot project out at the outdoor rink for. That's contingent on some outside funding, donation, fundraising things from that group. We also have an allocation of $150,000 for Bruce Frank Field rehabilitation. I've met with some of the youth baseball and little league folks, and really are pressing them to see if we want to have that type of investment on Bruce Frank Field, or if it's something we should look at holistically as a baseball complex for the whole community. So they're thinking about it. It's a very substantial investment in what we have right now, but if we want to do something different and new, we're talking millions of dollars instead of hundreds of thousands. So really we're looking at it to make sure that this is something we want to do, but it's really contingent on fundraising through those groups as well. So that would trigger it. But really what we're looking at doing at Bruce Frank is just some grading of the outfield, turf establishment and irrigation repair. Some of the irrigation in there is 30 plus years old, and it's just not working the way it used to. So we have one vehicle in here for streets and parks to be replaced in 2020, and then we do have a $50,000 Parks Open Space Trail System Plan contingency. So we're in the middle of Parks Open Space Trail System Plan. We likely won't get that plan until December. I think they're actually planning on potential adoption at the same time we do the budget. So just having something in there for the city to do something with that plan that next year, that $50,000 allocation. So in general, the 2020 levy, what we have in there is just under $700,000 allocation for the capital improvement, capital equipment plan. So any questions about that? We kind of got into some details about some items, but if there's any questions, please let us know.
I have one quick one. Why do it looks like we're purchasing the Ford F-250 under streets and parks. Why wouldn't we be leasing that at less than $35,000 a year?
So, if I may, that is something that we could look at leasing, and we could do a one-off lease. One issue that you could run into, and we can look at it before we actually purchase it, is that it's a small lease item, so you're not going to get the rate that we get when we package a bunch of different things together. So we can look at it and see if it makes sense. If not, it might make sense just to purchase it with cash. So we can definitely look at it. There will be a rate for that to be able to be leased in a similar nature of what we've done with some of our other equipment this year. So we can definitely look at it. That would then free up a little bit of some funds for maybe some other things, or to lower the levy.
Well, I would know it's not technically kicking the can down the road, but it does obligate you for future years to pay for that lease. So it's now or later, but it's a matter if we have other priorities we want to put in next year.
And I'm the one that obviously brought us into the weeds, and I did that on purpose because I think the Personnel and Budget Committee, we obviously have this level of detail when it comes to our conversations. And it's important that the other four of you understand that there's many, many, many hours that go into trying to figure out exactly every single item that's on the budget. And we do that dissection, so these particular items I think were important, worth talking about to the four of you. Fair enough? So, anybody have anything more for Director Dowd?
Well, we'll go through some more things here, but any more on
Yeah, sure.
detail
Yeah, we
information?
gotta go back.
Yep. So now I'm gonna go back a little bit. I had to put that stuff in there to begin with, so we had all the details before we went into the overall stuff. Overall here, we can see the tax levy breakdown and history. So on the right-hand side, you can see the graph shows the history of our tax levy from where it was in 2014 to what it is proposed in 2020. And then the breakdown of where those dollars go to on the left-hand side, the tax levy. So as you can see, the first half, or the first third, is the base levy, which basically is our stuff that is operations. That's the general fund, the community center fund, the CIP fund. And the Johnson Control loan is lumped in there as well. Now that's more debt than anything else, but it's been incorporated in the base levy for numerous years. I wasn't going to change it now. So overall, those increases are $222,000 of the levy increase for proposed for 2020. Sorry. The rest of debt service is the middle third there. That didn't change a whole lot. About $12,000 increase. What that is some of the as the debt gets older and gets more mature, the principal amount of the amount that we have to levy for it goes down every year, just slightly. And then we did the 2017 A bond that we backloaded a little bit in order to create basically a net levy equalization for the debt. So Jasper and myself, our idea would be to step the debt in order where we're not increasing the levy anymore, but we're just able to take that out every couple of years or so. So we're able to step and ladder that debt is what they call it. So that was our goal when we did the 2017 A bond, was to be able to basically step or ladder that debt with another one when it falls off. So the Johnson Control loan will fall off next year, and then in 2021, and then we should be able to move that money over to the 2017 A bond, and then not having that a levy increase at all for debt. It would be the same.
Director Dodd, perhaps you could explain for the benefit of everybody that's here what the Johnson Control loan consists of, and also point out the fact that of the 10.61% increase we're looking at for our levy, it's a 1.2% carryover because we have this Johnson Control loan from previous
year,
things
yep.
that have been going on.
So that Johnson Control loan was brought on, I'm not sure on the dates of when it was, I believe it was 2006-ish or so area, but it was done as an overall big project for the city to basically make us more efficient to the city. So we took on and did a bunch of efficiency items, energy efficiency items around the city, and it said, we'll pay you back over years to pay for those energy efficiency items. So we took on a massive loan or a massive basically lease or whatever you want to call it, and have been paying that back for many years. It is a 15-year bond or a loan we took out for Johnson Control, so it's done in 2021. Well, 2020 will be the last year we levy for it, and then we'll be able to carry over the dollars from 2020 because you levy 1 year before you actually have to pay the debt. So we levy in 2020 to pay it in 2021. So then once 2021, we will not have that debt or loan anymore from Johnson Controls. Again, like I mentioned, that debt, that money that is at the Johnson Control loan will then just move to the 2017 A bond because we backloaded that bond 2 or 3 years to wait for that Johnson Control loan to come off the books, so we can then use that money to fund the 2017 A street bond, which is your second street project for 8 blocks.
Does everybody understand that?
Oh, yeah.
Councilmember Thalens.
So how efficient are our efficiencies?
Well, I wasn't here before, but there's things that I know have been implemented that have helped us, and if we don't meet our efficiency goals, correct me if I'm wrong, Johnson Controls cuts us a check to make up for any efficiencies that we don't make up that they said we were going to. So, there are things, I think what happens is city buildings kind of get caught in a system that they're not looking at new technology very often. You build it and you use it until you need to do some major things to it. So, this was a very, I guess, hot thing to do probably in the mid-2000s, and then, mid to late 2000s. A lot of communities were approached by Johnson Controls, and almost every community did something because you pay this amount, you should receive that much every year in savings is what the way they sold it. So we may or may not, I don't know, a way of comparing our electric bills in 2004 to what they are now for looking at it. But I know if we don't meet our quota from what we think that we should be, then they cut us a check every
So
year.
that's right around between $15,000 and $20,000 a year, depending on it. So that does come back to us. We've received it already for this year, so. Good question. We were efficient in 2006 standards, very efficient. So, it is what it is. We did that, and that's what it is. So, 10.61% for the base levy increase, as the bottom number shows. 2.8% debt service levy increase, which we have no control over, but have to do that anyways. And then a 20% increase in general fund over the EDA, which we had mentioned earlier, which is about $8,000. Total citywide levy increase, which is the main number that we need to look at, is a 9.47% levy increase. Again, that is preliminary. We can bring that down, but we cannot go higher. So the reason why we have those numbers in there as maybe a little fudge factor would be for insurance or for health insurance in particular, or for citywide insurance or whatever, is because we can bring those numbers down once we get final numbers for 2020 from our insurance reps. So if we don't know those numbers, we have to put something in higher, and then we will come down once we find out those final numbers in, normally it's right around the end of October, but because we don't get those numbers until October or November time, we have to be high, otherwise we will have to pull from other places, steal from Peter to pay for Paul, when health insurance increases more than, I don't know, I think right now we have 5%, like, go back to my first second. We have 5% increase in health insurance. If it's less than that, we can pull it back and say, if it's only 3, then we have 2% we can play with and pull it back, 2% for health insurance. But if we have it at 5 and then it comes in at 7, we have to pull 2% from somewhere else in order to pay for health insurance, because we need to have health insurance for city employees. So we try to be good guesstimate, educated guess, but again, this is preliminary numbers. It most likely will go down. I'll say I'm almost 100% positive it's going to go down from where it's at 9.47%, just based on the numbers we have in there for educated guesses for increases. But again, that's the number you're sticking at right now, and it will, or it could go down. To give perspective on what that does for basically a homeowner, we go to the next one is, what does it do for a homeowner? What does it do for me, basically, as a resident in town? I did not look at any commercial buildings. This is just residential. So these numbers that you're seeing in there for 2019 actual are residential numbers for a house. So the average home value in the Sueur for 2019 was $173,000. That means in 2019 you got taxed $1,359 from the city, which is approximately $113 per month for taxes within the city. If your house did not increase in value, so say you had a $172,000 house this year and you have a $173,000 house next year, now that's probably not going to be for most of us, because within the city we saw about a 12.14% tax overall impact increase, so tax capacity increase within the city. So most homes, or they said on the average home, your home value went up 12.14%. If it did not, which it could possible, there's some homes that stay the same value, and there's some homes that decrease in value, even though the average is 12.14%. If it did stay the same, you'd see a decrease in your taxes. So your tax rate's going to go down no matter what, is what we're proposing today. Your tax rate will not go up, it will go down. So we would decrease $34 for the year, or about $3 a month for your taxes, so about $110. I did the math just to figure out if you have an average home value in 2019, what's your average home value going to be based on that 12.14%? You'd be at $194,000. So your home increases $21,000 in value, which is good for everybody, but then you have to pay the percentage of taxes for that as well. That's the other red number there. So the 2020 estimated number is $1,486. So again, looking at the average home in 2019, the average home in 2020, just doing simple math, it will be an increase of about $127 in taxes for the year, or about $10.58. What you don't see on that graph or table that I have there is I can't do different line items without making it seem really odd for different lines. So you'll see a decrease from last year, but if you have a $94,000 house, it would be a decrease of $38 for the year. So if your home value stayed the same, you'd still have a tax rate decrease. But why I show that number of what it was in 2019 versus what it will be in 2020 is because most likely everyone's home will increase in value. And so I don't want to show that it's going to be a decrease, and then when you have an increase in your taxes, you freak out and lose your mind. And that's not what I want either. So about $127 for the average home, about $10.58 per month, which I think is a good stat to know. Bringing it to about $123.83 per month for taxes within the city. On the right-hand side there, you can see the tax capacity rates, or the tax rates for the city overall. And the proposed 9.47% levy increase will still bring us to the lowest tax rate we've seen in 3 years. So it'll be under 76.59% tax rate within the city. That will go down if that levy number goes down. So will the tax rate. So if we decrease 1% of the tax levy, it'll be somewhere around 28% of the tax rate. It's not an exact 1-for-1, but it's pretty close.
Administrator Gruber.
I was just going to point that out, and Zach was already on it, but this is based on prelim levy numbers. Final levy, I think it's safe to say, will be lower than what the prelim levy is. We're pretty sure. So that tax capacity, or that tax capacity rate for 2020 at 76.59 will be lower come December. This is just preliminary. The numbers that you see actually on there for the previous years are payable, so those are the ones that were adopted in the final levy. So if you're looking at the tax rate for the community, it's a good thing. The tax rate is going down.
Yeah, no matter what, it will go down. So that is good for every person who lives in the city. So there's no way it would go up. And based on the numbers that were presented tonight, there's no way it could go up. The lowest tax rate, I went back quickly and just looked at 2014, which is the best information I can get for. It was 73.5% was the tax rate at that time. So if we have about a 3% decrease in the levy, which is all possible with the estimates and best guesses we have in there, and other funding sources, and if the building permits go up or whatever it is, those are other items that we don't really know 100% about, we could drop 3%. That's very plausible.
And Director Dowd, though you've already indicated this for our attention, that this is regarding the city of Sueur,
Correct.
we have an awful lot of people that watch us on live stream and Facebook. I want to reiterate that this is strictly the tax portion for the city of Sueur. Keep in mind, there's also the taxes for the city, the county of Sueur, and also for the independent school district.
Correct. Yep, so this is strictly just the city. Is there any questions about tax impact, tax levy, numbers we went over tonight, anything overall? I think it was a very good discussion, so I appreciate the discussion and feedback and everything else.
Anybody? Thank you very much, Director Dowd. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
So if I may, what we'll do is, if there are questions between now and the next meeting that come up and you're thinking about this, let us know. We will incorporate those into the discussion on September 9th. But at that time, that's when we'll propose to have a preliminary levy adoption. There'll be a resolution and all that, what we've done in the past. So if anything comes up, let us know. We can answer questions or something, if you're reviewing it. Let us know, and we can incorporate that into the next iteration of this.
And I would like to ask this of city staff. If anybody at this table has any questions or concerns regarding anything associated with the 2020 budget, or anything associated with how taxes work, or any of that type of stuff, I take it that city staff is going to have time to accommodate those questions and concerns and set up an appointment with one of our council members.
Oh, definitely. Yep, definitely. If you have questions, reach out. Some of the stuff gets pretty complicated, and we'll be happy to talk you through it.
Thank you. Okay, there's no action required on that particular agenda items. We'll now move on to 8 Bravo, which is our zoning code update. Second reading and adoption of an ordinance updating chapters 152 and 153 of the Sueur City Code. City Administrator Gruber.
Mayor Haig, members of City Council, exactly right. This is the second reading of the zoning code update, which includes chapters 152 and 153. There are actually, I believe, 4 action items related to this at the end when Mr. Maggio is done with the presentation. One will be to waive the second reading, which I believe you probably should do if you want to move forward. And then the adoption of the ordinance for chapter 152, adoption of the ordinance for 153, and then we have a resolution for a summary publication. So a resolution that says what we're going to put in the paper, where the actual ordinances are going to be looked at, because we obviously can't publish the entire zoning code update ordinance in the paper. So 4 action items, we have them listed out at the end of the presentation, and with that I'll hand it off to Mr. Maggio.
Director DiMaggio, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Haig, members of the council. The last 2 weeks ago, when I was here for the last city council meeting, we kind of went over some of the major changes of the zoning code. Since that time, we did have some members of the council who had some questions, and so we have made a few changes, and I wanted to be clear tonight what those changes were in between the first reading and the second reading. So I put together just a few of them on the PowerPoint. Number 153007. So we just changed some words to make it a little bit more clear at the recommendation of one of the council members. It originally read, the city council or property owner upon receipt of the staff study shall, and those words have been changed, that we've now added about how to get an amendment in such case that the city council on its own initiative or upon request for an amendment may conduct a study to determine if the use is acceptable or not. And so if the city council, if it's found to be appropriate, that they can initiate an amendment to the chapter. So just kind of to clarify how someone would go about asking for an amendment. Typically, it would, if a property owner wanted to have a change to the amendment, they would come to you and ask you to make that change. You would then ask staff to do some research, find out if that change should be made. It isn't typically just the property owner on their own asking that we update the zoning code ordinance. The next one is 153, building permits and site plan review. It says a separate zoning permit and building permit. That was combined to say a separate zoning or building permit, or both as applicable. In some cases, someone may only need a zoning permit, they may need a building permit. In some cases, they need both. So I think it's important to be clear that they have to follow all of our regulations, whether they be zoning or building. So I appreciate that comment as well. The next one, it was an excellent question on recreational vehicles. It read recreational vehicles less than 16 feet in length, and this was updated to read recreational vehicles 16 feet or less in length. So if it's 16 feet or less, then you'll have to follow special things for exterior storage of that trailer. There was also a comment about lot size, and so this was revisited as well. And originally in the R4 district, the minimum lot size was 10,000 square feet with the minimum width being 50 feet. That was revisited, and now it has been updated that the minimum lot area be 15,000 square feet. The minimum lot width is 85 feet for a townhome and 100 feet for an apartment or other uses. So I think this will be more clear, giving a little bit more room in that high density area.
Sam, excuse me, would you please repeat the numbers?
Sure. So originally in the minimum lot area for R4 it was 10,000 square feet and the minimum lot width was 50 feet. That has been updated that the minimum lot area is now 10,000 square feet and the minimum 15,000 square feet, and the minimum lot area is 85 feet for a townhome lot or 100 feet for apartments. There were also a couple changes on the map that I appreciate that they were caught. One of them was actually Councilmember Favelice's new building. It is going to be rezoned to light industrial. It kind of falls into an area where there's some housing adjacent to it. And so it kind of got caught up in the map in that area, but that has been updated. Also, one of the city lots out by the airport we missed. But I think everything else on the map, I think we've caught almost everything now. It's been looked at and updated numerous times, and I'm feeling very confident about that. So the proposed action tonight, as Jasper had explained, I am asking that you waive the second reading of the zoning code update, that you approve the ordinance number 582, which is chapter 152, and also a motion approving ordinance number 583, which is chapter 153, And also that you approve resolution number 2019-022, which allows for a summary of these to be published in the newspaper.
I have a question for Councilmember Krogman. You had a rather extensive list from the last meeting of the different things that you want looked at regarding the zoning ordinance. Has Director DiMaggio now answered every one of your concerns? Do you feel confident that we can move forward on these actions?
The answer is no, but I think we can move forward. Let me explain. There's a number of things here that are still troubling to me.
Sure.
If we could look at 153-026. I indicated the language appears very broad. Where's the definition of what this is limited to? For example, where a home or business owner paints a room or puts in a new carpet that improves, alters, or in some cases repairs a building or structure. This thing says you need a building permit for that. Obviously, you don't need one to paint a wall in your house.
So I believe, did you get the responses from
We
Nate
did
on all
not.
those?
No, we didn't.
I indicated this morning to Jasper through the mayor that we have no responses to any of these.
I apologize. I had sent them on in hopes that they were sent out to all of you, but apparently they were not. So Nate did go through each one of your questions and answer them and made the updates that you had asked for, but I have a list of all of his responses to all of those questions, and there is a response. I apologize for them not getting sent to you, but there is a response.
Well, the reason why I wanted to make sure of this is because, like I said, Councilmember Krogman took an awful lot of time
I
putting
agree,
this
sir.
together. And you basically responded to about 4 of those items of the 15 or 20 or so that he had indicated, so.
Yes, and many of them, as Nate responded in there, that he didn't feel that some of them needed to be updated, that they were clarified in other sections, and he did cross-reference them. So unfortunately, I apologize that you didn't get that sent to you, but he did go through and actually make an extensive list answering every single one of those questions. And so they have been looked at, but I apologize that they weren't forwarded on.
Councilmember Families.
Okay, you can still move forward with this, and even though we'll get these responses and still make changes at the next
No.
meeting. You can't make any changes there.
No.
I'll politely say I'm troubled by this because there's some relatively important things in here. One of them, for example, is important, but it doesn't affect our vote. I asked about the adult uses things.
Yes, sir.
They're relatively offensive just to read. Relatively, I'll take out. They are offensive just to read. And I simply asked if they stood the test of time, and then the answer is obvious, yes. It's coming from a planner that knows this stuff, but I thought we should
Jasper,
tell the public
sorry,
that.
no. Jasper, on your email, do you have the responses that Nate sent to us? I wonder if we could just pull them up and go through them.
I could. I'm trying to think if Nate even sent them to me or if they
I sent them.
You sent them to
Yeah.
me. Okay. I could probably find them.
Yeah.
I apologize if they didn't get sent out. There was miscommunication. So we could pull those up if you wanted. Otherwise, we could. Yeah, I think we could take a 5-minute recess. I could pull them up and we could put them up on here and we can go through them for the sake. I feel like they're all probably answered, but we can go through them individually if you want.
I think it'd be a good idea because that way we can go ahead and take the necessary action. Otherwise, I don't see any other choice but to go ahead and kick the can down the road until the September 9th meeting.
No, that's
For
fine.
the second reading.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Families.
I move for us to have a 5-minute recess.
Okay, we have a motion for a 5-minute recess. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We're now on a 5-minute recess.
Yep.
And I'll wait for Dual here. Give me the heads up when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm hoping that.
This one is, this may be changed if desired.
I'm gonna go ahead and entertain a motion to go ahead and reconvene the city council meeting from our previous recess.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's now back in full order. Our Director DiMaggio.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of the questions that were previously brought up were questions regarding what trumps things in non-metro areas, such as, is it the zoning code or is it the comp plan? Often we have trainers come in that tell us in the metro area the comp plan trumps everything else. On here, Nate has explained that that is not the case in non-metro areas. That is the case in the metro areas where they have the Met Council, but in non-metro areas, that it is the zoning ordinance that is what's used to implement the comprehensive plan and to build links to the plan. So that was one of the questions that we had. There were some grammatical errors which were updated. It talked about the city council now being the board of adjustment and appeals. It says training is not required by the state of Minnesota. The council will be advised on these matters by the planning commission. The planning commission will host the public hearings and make recommendations on these actions. Currently, the council makes final action in zoning amendments and conditional use permits, which are complex, but if not more than variances and appeals. Staff confidently believes that the wisdom and good judgment consistently expressed by the city council on other land use matters will extend seamlessly to these additional actions. So basically, by you becoming the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, you'll now look at variances and appeals. Those are just two new things that you would add on to. Currently, you are looking at conditional use permits, zoning amendments, things like that. So it's just a few additional jobs. One of the questions that Councilmember Krogman did have was about things being too broad, and one of the questions was going from zoning or building permits. So that's where we did update the language on that one. Another one that he had was about wondering where grills go, and there is a section on refuse containers. There is also a section that goes under, I believe that it's called, I'm trying to think the term for it, recreational items and how those are stored. Things like grills would go under recreational items. So those are covered, but they're just covered by a different section. One of the, I'm sorry.
Can we pause for a moment?
Sure.
Look at 153057. That's where he says it's covered.
Yep, so what he's saying is it's actually intended to be covered by section 153058.
Okay, 58C10.
Yep.
Yeah, so just the trash and the recycling containers are 153.057 and everything else.
Goes
that
under
we're
those
talking about is
recreational
the
items.
058 Charlie 10.
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha.
153058C10. Okay, he considers them to be recreational equipment.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go on.
Another question is it was Newell had asked, what is head-on parking?
Yeah.
And so it does talk, there is a reference in city code to what head-on or head-in parking is. Basically, here in Sueur, they don't want you to do any, where you're backing into your parking stall. They want you to have all head-in going towards the curb. Some cities do that, there I've seen it's becoming more popular, I think, where they actually have you back into the parking stall along Main Street, and that is something that our code prohibits. Here in Sueur, we want everyone to do head-in parking, which is their car, the front of their car is going towards the curb.
My purpose there was simply to make sure everybody understands what it is.
Okay. And I'm not so sure that people in the city of Sueur understand that that's part of our ordinance.
Well, and I do see people parking other
Exactly.
directions all the time.
Mhm.
I think it's important though, as we have developers come in who are maybe making new areas or as we're designing new streets, we're not designing them to be the opposite. We want all of our parking to be facing the same direction. That is our goal. So that's kind of where that comes in. The next question that Councilmember Krogman had was just clarifying the length of the trailers. If it was 16 feet or less, that was updated. The next one it talked about was 153069. How are public properties, how are they designated for overnight parking or for bus routes? This is in section 153-145B, which I don't think is part of what we updated right now. And he said it could be amended or removed if desired. When I searched for it today, I did not see it as part of this update. So I think that was part of a different section. and I'm wondering if it has to do with part of the nuisance or different things that the police chief actually regulates. That often has to do with who can park where different stops would be.
If I may, it appears that this is covered then in something that's not part of what we're taking on tonight.
Yes, sir.
Right. The reason I ask this is, for example, when the fly-in occurred at the airport back in June, there were all kinds of trailers out there, and I inquired about that. I wasn't complaining, I just wondered, and was told the police chief has the authority to give people a permit to do that. But we want to make sure that people aren't just parking in any park around here, camping out in Legion Park. So as long as we have something, if it's other than these zoning ones, that's fine. And so, if I say, let's please move on.
Yes, sir. And I think one point that you're bringing up that is something Jasper and I talked about is you put some money aside for wayfinding signage. And I think that's something that is missing is what is a public parking area? Where can people park overnight? So that's something that we're going to be working on in the future to make sure that people understand what are our parking rules and that they're visibly posted. The next one was a typo. There was a P missing from public utilities, so that was updated. Newell's question about the adult uses and if they had stood the test of time. It says these are generally from the city's current code. The regulations appear to be consistent with the previous guidance from land use attorneys in Minnesota. These regulations are required by law, otherwise such uses may be placed nearly anywhere in the community. So we have to go through and list all those. One of the questions was about the solar farms. At the time that this was done, it was reviewed by MMPA, our electrical supplier, and that they felt that there was no need to expand the solar farm usage within city limits. That is something that if you want to change in the future, that we could have our code looked at again. But I guess I agree with that. I don't see anywhere within city limits that we would want them to take a large parcel of land and turn it into a solar farm based on the cost of putting in water, sewer, things like that.
This has to do with the proposal we've made to MMPA to put in a solar installation in town. And my reading of what's in this thing now would be we could not do it.
Well, I
And
think
we don't want to be in that box.
my question to you would be, do you need to put it on vacant land, or is there city-owned property that we can put it on the rooftops? Because that is allowed by our code.
Understand, we don't know yet.
Right.
Okay? It will
So,
depend on if they even allow it, or if they offer us that opportunity. This is one where, you asked me before, whatever, we can make an amendment if we have to make another small amendment. I don't want a whole bunch of them, nor do you. I don't mean
exactly.
me personally, but we don't. But this is one I think we have to be aware of, that's why I pointed it out. Because we are proposing that they put in some kind of solar installation for showing renewable energy and the efforts being made by our wholesale provider. Okay, let's move on.
Well, I think you bring up a good point.
And that was in lieu of
Councilmember.
course, the windmill relocation that they wanted to go ahead and offer to the city. So,
Well, they may do both, you never know.
And I think you bring up a good point. As time changes, this is not set in stone. This code, there will be things that will have to be amended in the future, and that's okay. But I think giving the best information that we have today is what we've done. The next question would be small wind generators on parcel greater than an acre in size. Right now, we are allowing that. If you have the fall area that you can put a small wind generator, we had some people specifically ask about it on the planning commission who would like to put in small wind generators. If you have a lot greater than an acre in size and you have the fall clearance, then we're gonna allow you to do that. If you don't wanna do that, then you have the right to change that now, but that's what we have allowed based on the planning commission's recommendations. There was a question about daycare and how if that's done by a home occupancy or if that's done by the state of Minnesota. Daycares are actually done by state statute, not by city statute. So that was another excellent question. And
Let's
then,
be clear, if I may, for the council.
yes, sir.
This home occupation thing, it's a funny phrase, but it means occupations that are done out of a home. It's not like somebody's occupying a home. It's kind of awkward when you first see it. So what we know now is the state statutes control this, and it is allowed in home settings. Because we have some of those here.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then last but not least was the 50-foot lot minimum in R4, and those were updated. So I think that answered all the questions that Councilmember Krogman had, and I know Councilmember Favely's got some stuff on the map. I think other than that, we've gone through and updated everything for this second reading.
I think the key to think about when it comes to this is that we now have a living, breathing document that's rather inclusive. But there's always gonna be those situations where something may come in front of city council that's gonna require a variance or, you know, a CUP or whatever it may be, that's gonna go ahead and change the existing documents.
Well, as time changes.
You never have something that's gonna be complete.
No, exactly. But really, I think the important thing is not waiting, another 25 or 30 years to update this. It's to
Exactly.
looking at it more on a regular basis. And I think the planning commission is really up to taking on that task and making recommendations to you. And hopefully, it will be done in a more timely and efficient manner in the future.
Anybody have any questions for Director DiMaggio?
I have one more. I'd like the council to look at this.
Okay.
You want to look at 153, 109, C10, or C16. It's on page 32. There are page numbers, thank goodness. The subdivision doesn't have them, but this section does. Page 32. She said this is a 1 acre lot or greater in any zoning district could have a small wind generator, WECS. Let me ask Director DiMaggio, how many of these 1 acre plots do we have in town, and where are they?
You would have quite a few of them here in town, actually. Out by Dobby Lane, we have quite a few of them that are 3 acres, 5 acres, quite a bit bigger than that. We have some, basically on the outskirts of town is where our larger ones are. We have some out in urban reserves still that aren't served by city water, city sewer. So there are, I would say, maybe 30 or 40 lots that have that capacity that are 1 acre or larger.
I just point out to the council, if you allow it, they cannot exceed 35 feet in height. That's a pretty tall thing to be in a residential area.
Well, especially if it has anything to do with the flight path through the airport.
Well, that'd be required, that'd be
Yeah.
restricted by FAA rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, sir, I'm not sure how many people are gonna come up with these, but this was something that there were some specific members of the planning commission that were looking at getting these. And I've seen some of the farmsteads around where I live, that some people have them. I don't know if they're as common as solar is. And basically, unfortunately, I don't know that we have the wind capacity here to make much use out of them, but that was what was recommended by the planning commission.
Yeah, I'm a little troubled, and I'm a part of that commission, but I missed one of the meetings because I was out of the area. But planning commission members shouldn't be making decisions based on what they want, it's what the community should have. And I'm not being critical of them, but the way I'm hearing that doesn't sound right.
Well, I could be saying it incorrectly, but
Yeah.
that was something that they had heard from people that they wanted to have.
That's
these.
different.
Yeah.
To say I'm on the planning commission, I want a wind farm on my farm.
Well, I don't know that anyone wants a wind farm, but I think that
I know,
there were
I'm
members
exaggerating.
saying that, that they had heard from people that they wanted to have wind. But like I said, it would be interesting to see how successful it really is based on what we found, that we don't have as much wind as people think.
That I'm aware of because we looked into it for the city. Council members, it's up to you, Mr. Mayor. I'm willing to go forward with this. I think it's, quite frankly, a little bit risky. There could be some 1 acre lots, for example, up in, what's up the hill from the water tower? What's that called? Cedar Ridge? You want wind farms up, a wind mill up there, a turbine? It's a question.
Well, again, the good thing is that if we do have a situation, I think that we do have the ability to go ahead and look at it on a case-by-case basis. We have a document that we can use as our standard, which we obviously need, and there's always going to be variations,
And I think they are gonna have to prove to us that fall zone, right? As part of their building permit, they're gonna have to prove to us that if something were to happen and it were to fall over, that it wouldn't negatively impact their neighbors. So having the fall zone clearance, I believe it's in there. Please double check me, but there is a fall zone in there.
I just can't possibly imagine that, like the Councilmember Krogman's point about the wind. I see solar certainly as something that people would be looking at doing, but wind, I just...
Newell, what's our wind turbine that size cost? Do you have any idea?
I do
Roughly.
not, I hesitate to answer, but it would be pricey. Because you're talking about just not putting the thing in, you gotta have a way to the grid, to the house. it's a pricey piece, and there's maintenance to it. You don't just put them in, they have to be maintained at a certain point. It's an interesting question, folks,
Anybody else have anything? Councilmember Sullivan?
Sam, can you go back to number 7? I'm just curious, to me, in Councilmember Crow's question, to me there seems to be more than one question in there. And it looks like in the response it answers maybe one of those questions.
So there are 2 different sections that address it, and one of them says exceeding 16 feet is how the other one, so he didn't update that because it does say exceeding 16 feet. It's weird how, one thing that's always tricky about the code is often you can't just look in one area to find an answer. You often have to look in numerous areas to find the answer. And so depending on the type of trailer it is, it could be a recreational vehicle. So then you would actually go to the recreational vehicle section where you would see the 16 feet or less, I believe is what it says in length. But I think that's the important thing is it a commercial trailer? What type of trailer is it? And so that's where you have to double check the different sections of code. So it can be frustrating for people, and I know it's frustrating for me, especially when I first started at the accessory structure. So if you were to add on a garage, that's in a completely different section than where you're looking for your home regulations. But that's why it is important that you give us a call and we'll help anyone answer these questions. But it does say in one section exceeding, so he didn't update that section, he just updated this one.
Right, and I see that, but it looks like in the question it talks about 153.069. A addresses vehicles over 16 feet, but says nothing about being in a structure or being screened.
Yep, and so those are different. 153.069 is a different section altogether.
Right.
So 058. Can you look quickly? I don't have my code in front of me. What 058 is?
And I think that's what I'm running into is I left mine sitting on my desk at home.
Yeah. So 058, I believe, is recreational vehicles, and 153.069, I think, has to do more with commercial vehicles, and that if you have a commercial vehicle in a commercial lot, that there is screening that you have to do. Because if it's adjacent to a residential neighborhood.
So are we classifying anything over 16 feet then a commercial vehicle?
I believe that if you're saying if it's over, I think how the code reads is it doesn't matter if it's recreational and over 16 feet. I think that they're saying in it that it has to have a certain type of pad that it has to be parked on. As I was driving around town today, I noticed a lot of people who have campers just sitting outside their homes. And so if it is over 16 feet, it does need to have a certain pad that in town, I believe, is listed for sale, and there's a new company looking at acquiring it. So I think if that is a demand, I hope that that's something that they consider building in the future, is to have larger spaces for people who have those extra cars, extra boats, things like that, so that their neighbors don't, have issues come winter time.
Councilmember Families?
On the same topic, and you said not parking on grass, but there are a number of residential and commercial products that are out there now that are structural to hold the weight of vehicles, and you can plant grass. They're actually made for that. And the purpose of that is so that you don't have the ground runoff issues with having asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
And, does our code, or will our code be able to work with those types of products?
So it depends on if you're a homeowner or if you're a commercial business. If you're a homeowner, we would even allow you to bring in a gravel pad as long as you had a pad. It doesn't have to be concrete or bituminous if you're a homeowner. It just has to be a pad that you can safely park the vehicle on. But I think that's the difference, is trying to figure out, is it a commercial business or is it just a homeowner who's looking for someplace to park it? Many of the homeowners, though, I think do a great job. I know a lot of them have added on extra concrete pads on the side of their house or an extra gravel. And one thing I always remind neighbors of is you still have to keep the setback from your neighbors to your house. So I don't want you forcing water runoff onto your neighbor by adding that pad. So it is, like I said, very important that they give me a call to make sure they understand the setbacks, make sure that they're telling me what kind of material that they're using. We can talk about it and make sure that they're putting it in a safe spot.
So I have a gravel back driveway to our commercial property. Doesn't matter what I do, it grows. I have grass and weeds no matter what I do, no matter how I try to kill it, it still finds a way to be able to grow in there. It's made for commercial, it's the correct substrate, and we've been looking at the idea of something like this that you could put down that if I have to mow it, it might as well be grass than weeds. No matter, we've tried everything to stop this from happening, and I've even had them come out and start looking at putting down asphalt. But it looks nice if it were to be left like that, and I can park on there. I can park the vans and the trailer back there and still have a decent, you know. So when you're saying it, whether or not it's residential or commercial, I know that there's products out there that are being used for this stuff. And what I'm asking is are we flexible enough to be able to use products that are being approved throughout the United States?
I would say that we are. I know that there are numerous products that come up. If you were to drive around Mystic Lake, you'll actually see that they have what looks like a paver block patio, but actually the water can go through there. It's porous, so the water can go right through there. I can't imagine the cost that they pay for that, but when you have stormwater issues, you pay what you pay, right? And so I get that. I think the important thing is sometimes I'll have people say, well, it's better for me to leave it gravel. Well, that isn't always the case, you know, because it can affect your neighbors. And like you said, weeds still will grow through it. You now have rocks moving, you know, there are issues as well. But I think making sure that you work with city staff to try to figure this out rather than just pretend it's not happening, and I think is the key, is we want to work with you. We want to make sure it's efficient for your business, cost effective, but just ignoring it isn't the best answer either.
If you want to know anything about it, let me know. The guy that did that used to be my business partner.
Oh, interesting.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, this is an example of where I've got concerns about wind turbines or whatever it might be. We all have some concerns. I think we need to move forward with this, and as you said, it's a living document. We can learn, if we only have 2 or 3 changes in the next year, that to me would be rather reasonable, because we're going to learn as we apply it. Our economic or community development director is the point person for this, perhaps also our building inspector, but I think it's time to move forward.
Yeah, considering where we were and where we are now, I mean, we're light years ahead, so we may have some changes ahead of us, but this council, I believe, is equipped to deal with those as requested. So that said, I'm looking for a motion to go ahead and waive the second reading of the zoning code update.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Looking for a motion to approve ordinance number 582, which is chapter 152 updates.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
To be clear, that's the subdivision.
That's correct, the subdivision. Any questions or concerns? We have a motion, we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. The third one is the motion approving ordinance number 583, which is chapter 153 updates.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And last but not least, looking for a motion to approve resolution number 2019-022, approving the summary publication for the updates.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. This city council is extremely grateful for all the work that both you as our community development director, but also our planning commission did preparing these documents, and please pass on our debt of gratitude for something that's been long overdue in the city of Sueur. Thank you so much, Director DiMaggio. Administrator Kruger.
So I'll just give a timeline update. We'll publish this in the paper. It'll be on September 4th, I believe. And then this will actually go into effect on September 11th. So just a timeline for that, and working with the paper to get things published. We need about a week's notice. So that'll be when it is officially adopted.
Okay. The next item on the docket is 8 Charlie, which we have a nuisance hearing for 266 South Elmwood Avenue. City Administrator Krugel.
Mayor Hague, members of City Council, we do have a nuisance hearing. The property owner has been invited in for this hearing. I don't believe that they are in attendance for this. Pictures have been included in the packet about this. It's pretty prevalent what's going on here. There's a bunch of different things going on here. There's some zoning issues that we are working through. This is considered a nuisance. There isn't a home occupation permit on file for this as well. So there's a lot of things going on here, and in general, I think this property is exhibiting some nuisance behavior. So in close, this is up to City Council as far as how we would like to handle this type of thing. Originally there was a letter sent in July, early July. There was another one sent again in August, and now we are here today to come up with a solution for this. So in the packet you will see a resolution. In that resolution there's some areas where we can adjust that accordingly if we feel how we feel fit. Basically that's associated with timelines related to abatement. Now the individual hasn't shown up. We've received certification that they received and signed for the certified letter. So we know that they've received it. In some cases we don't receive that notification. So we know that they've at least received the packet to be here today. So what we're looking for, if the City Council chooses to do anything, what we're looking for is just what we would like, and what the recommendation is that we abate the issues on the property, that being zoning, nuisance, those types of things. And if that is the so desire of the City Council, attach a timeline to that, and then pass the resolution as amended by City Council. So regarding the timeline, there's been adequate notice, in my opinion, as far as dating back to the beginning of July. With no response, we haven't been able to make contact with this property owner by visiting their property as well. So it really is up to the discretion of City Council how fast that we would want to do this. There are some timelines regarding if it's approved to do it tomorrow. There's some procedural things we have to do. It might be at a minimum 3 days before we can actually access the property. A lot of times what you'll see is if City Council does take action, that individual property owner will take the necessary steps to abate the property. So it's up to City Council. We're here to help facilitate the discussion, and we'll go from there.
Well, we're 1 day shy of 7 weeks since the July 9th, where the homeowner was notified. So, anybody have any ideas in regards to how we want to proceed on this?
I move full abatement, 5 days, for all nuisance.
So we have a motion to abate both the zoning and nuisance issues on the property within 5 days.
I would second that.
Okay. So we have a motion to abate the zoning and nuisance issues on the property located at 266 South Elmwood Avenue within 5 days. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Please carry out the abatement order. Line item 8 Delta has been cleared. That abatement has been cleared. We now move on to line item 8 Echo, which is the August 26, 2019 closed meeting summary. Administrator Kruger.
Mayor Hague, members of the City Council, as you are all aware, we did have a closed meeting to discuss the acquisition of real or personal property related to the potential dissolution of the JPA that formed the Minnesota River Valley Public Utilities Commission. What I've done is just kind of summarize 2 basic points about this meeting for the public record. As far as the direction that was received by staff, I interpreted this, so feel free to change this however you feel, and this will be entered into the public record regarding that closed meeting. The 2 points, the first one being is the City of Sueur has no interest in owning the wastewater collection system force main upstream of the Henderson Station Road lift station unless full maintenance costs are recuperated in perpetuity. The second point was that the City of Sueur will require an equitable recuperation of future capital costs through rates or a monthly fee to acquire this property. So those are the 2 basic takeaway points from the direction, that was received at that meeting. If there's anything that you would like to change regarding this or add, we can add that, and then we'll amend that, and the city clerk will put that part of this packet.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Would just ask for clarification on the second point, saying that we'd require equitable recuperation to acquire this property. Wouldn't that be meaning that if we acquired that property, we would look for recuperation of that cost through rates?
It would be, yeah, if I may, the intent is, so if the property, the whole plant itself, the land that it's on is acquired by the city of Sueur through this process, there's an expectation that there will be capital cost recuperation, future capital cost recuperation from the city of Henderson. So not necessarily recouping the cost of that property, but if there's any maintenance or pumps, things like that that go out, there's some contribution from the city of Henderson through a use agreement that the city of Sueur will get some dollars back from.
I think if we're gonna put this into public record, I think we need to clarify or clean that language up.
Okay.
Just because I think it could be interpreted in many different ways. If it's somebody else looking at it a few years from now.
Do you have a recommendation in regards to what that language should be?
I don't. But I just, to me that's confusing because I think it can mean several different things.
Councilmember Fabulous.
Well, I think that you're narrowing in on Anderson, and that should not be. In fact, it should be an encompassing that we will have the right to be raising the rates or whatever to recoup whatever cost from any entity. You don't know whether or not there is another town that would want to try to use our collection system or whatever in the future, and you don't know what other partners we may have. At the end of the day, I would broaden that out instead of trying to narrow it in.
So whether or not it's a particular partner that we may have or an end user.
That's right. You know, if and we have to be able to raise the rates to maintain the facility, and that's what it is.
If I may,
Councilman.
logically that's correct. However, this discussion focused on Henderson and the lift line to Henderson.
That's correct, the lift station. Yeah.
So it's not as broad, it's not in general, this is, we have to summarize
Compensation.
without disclosing everything here, what happened at that closed meeting.
Two specific actions.
Yeah, by the way, the words "to acquire this property" are what threw me, but go ahead.
And on the board, you can see I have those words highlighted. I think we can clear it up just by removing those.
Yeah.
And in general, it's just saying we require some recuperation of future capital costs through rates or monthly fees. Not to acquire this property, but just in general, if there's this type of thing going on, we need to make sure that we're covering those costs, because those are significant in the future. So I don't know if that would clean it up, or if there's any other suggestions. I'm willing to.
Well, I think the final suggestion might be is that if staff feels as though they need to go ahead and run this through our city attorney, just to make sure that we have the right language, I think that we'd probably be in support of that.
If I may, there isn't any legality related to this. This isn't putting it in stone. This is just a summary of what, if this group feels that this is appropriate for that conversation that was had, that's all that this isn't obligating us to do this. This is just so that the public can see what we talked about.
Well, with that said, do we feel that these two bullet points now address, it's a good recapitulation of what was discussed at the 12 August meeting?
To be clear, that's after removing the words "to acquire this property."
Yes.
What you see on the screen.
Right, what we see on the screen.
Correct, and I can read that second bullet point now, just to get it in the audio record. So the second bullet point will now be: the city of Sueur will require an equitable recuperation of future capital costs through rates or monthly fees.
Okay. Let's see, there's no there's no action given. This is just basically a summary statement for the purpose of the newspapers.
If, because we make changes tonight to this, I think it'd be appropriate to have just a motion approving the changes as stated. And then,
Would it be to approve what's there?
exactly, yep.
Fair enough.
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Summary for that closed meeting is now complete. Okay, so now we move on to our comments, reports, and items of appreciation. And Councilmember Krogman, would you kick us off, please, sir?
I'll be delighted. I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Families.
Just that we have our buck coming up on Thursday. That's all I've got.
Okay. Councilmember Sullivan.
Just hard buck on Thursday, nothing else to report.
Boy, you guys make this easy tonight. Wow. Councilmember Kirby.
I don't have much, we didn't have any meeting tonight for the EDA. I do have the, just a quick announcement, inaugural fall fundraiser for the Ridgeview Medical Center. That's October 5th. If you need tickets, talk to Bob Roder.
What is that fundraiser, sir?
It's gonna be our inaugural fall fundraiser.
Inaugural fall
Yeah,
fundraiser.
yeah. Well, it's the first one.
Do you have any idea what that consists of?
Well, it's gonna be at the Caribou Gun Club. I can't give you too many more details on it. I just wanna get the word out.
And this is specifically for the hospital
Yes,
board?
yes.
Okay. Is there anything that you can talk to us in regards to what transpired tonight at the EDA meeting?
We didn't have one. That's why I didn't have a report.
Oh,
Didn't have one.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Roloff.
I don't have anything at this time.
Okay, Councilmember Huntington.
Well, nothing's off, so. Thank you, Jeff. Well, I got 4 things, actually.
Wow.
Well, 5, I think. MHRA meeting, this Wednesday. That's it. And that, and Murph Puck on Thursday, so, just to repeat that. I have a couple things. I wanted to say thanks to the people that did a mural that was put on Main Street there. It's just great. I really appreciate it. And leading into that, there was a community effort last week. I don't know what day it was, but some people got together and cleaned up that lot in front. I know the Boy Scouts were a part of it, but there was many citizens that did it too, to clean the weeds, and I thank them for that. And lastly is school starts next Tuesday locally for LSH and the park, and wanting citizens to keep aware of the pedestrian walks. Kids are back in school, so I'm always want to bring that up because I see a lot of people going through them when people are in the crosswalks. So it is illegal.
Yes, it is.
And school buses too. And passing school buses are gonna really clamp down this year on that stuff, so.
Thank you. I very, very much deserved appreciation also for the mural and also the cleanup of that property. Looks so much better now.
Absolutely.
And to Councilmember Huntington's point regarding the walkways, I don't know if there's a day that goes by that I do not see an infraction in this town regarding walkways. And I know that with school buses, same type of thing, that arm comes down, you are required by the law to stop. So please review what you're supposed to and what you're not supposed to be doing, because I think we're gonna have to make sure that we start getting some tickets out there, because we certainly don't wanna get somebody killed. Okay? I don't have anything else. Director Lawrence, do you have anything for us, ma'am?
No, thank you.
Okay. City Administrator Kruger.
I have very little. I think that's a very good point about school bus safety. We tried to do some social media posts to kind of make people get back into the swing of seeing school buses out there. I know that there's a very robust program where school bus drivers can report people that violate that law, and that's enough to write tickets. So if that's the case, those people should receive tickets for that infraction. One thing we recently, with the Coventry Road discussion, opening of that, some of the speeding items have come to light that we want to start looking at that. a little bit more. So we've engaged the county in some conversations about, what can we do on some of their roads, because a lot of the roads that lead into the city are actually county roads, and how we can try to make those safer, and maybe try to make them more conducive to people slowing down. The county engineer David Teagues had some ideas about that, especially with the Trunk Highway 112 as far as striping goes. But one thing that we've recently got, we currently have one speed trailer that you've probably seen out and about recently. Through kind of a program, a Big Brother program, we've acquired another speed trailer for no cost from the city of Savage. So we've gotten that. It still has the city of Savage logos on it and everything. It's a perfectly fine speed trailer. They just got another one and upgraded to a different type of system. So we have that. So you'll likely see multiple speed trailers out and about, which from conversations about when we have it out right now, our current one, generally people see that and see some flashing lights and see they're going above the speed limit and they slow down. And I sent out some documentation from the local road resource board, and that's kind of what they said. People initially start looking at these things, they are in the forefront of their mind when they're driving, but eventually studies have shown that people get used to them and they stop thinking, oh, this is a big deal, even though it's flashing lights at me. So there's things to kind of look outside of the box as far as what we can do to effectively reduce speeds in town. It's an issue. Every city, everywhere you go, people are trying to get from point A to point B as fast as they can. So there's things we're conscious about it, and you'll likely see some striping changes that maybe people might not like at first, but they're intended to reduce speeds, so make you feel more confined. Kingsway comes to mind. That's a really easy road to feel like you're driving really slow on. So it's in the forefront. We're going to try some things and try to incorporate things to address them. We do write a lot of speeding tickets in the community, but as our police chief says, when they see a cop car, when people see a cop car, they're slowing down, and then they see other people slowing down. So it's not as easy as just you seeing somebody speeding. If they see a cop car, people are aware of that. So we're going to try to do some things that are kind of more outside of the box, but enforcement is also a good way to lower the speeds.
Question in regards to the speeding. What's the policy, and you may not know this at this time, so I hate to put you on the spot, but what is the policy regarding speed bumps?
I do know this. So in general, on any public roads, they're not allowed unless there's specific order from the MnDOT commissioner. So you can do it, but they need to be approved through MnDOT, because technically MnDOT has jurisdiction over all roads, all public roads. Now there's been some recent legislation that could give the city local control, or does give city local control. We could implement those in our roads that we have, but a lot of the problem areas, from what I hear, are not our roads. They're county roads or state roads, or really we don't have any state roads anymore, really, but they're mostly county roads. But since we do now have control of our local roads, we could put speed bumps out if there's problem areas. But I think we'd have to bring engineering in and have them find a reason to justify it and prove that they will work, because they disrupt the road surface. They for maintenance, there's an additional cost, and people might not know how to handle speed bumps either.
So to deal with the county roads, we would have to go ahead and initiate the request through the county for our county roads?
It'd be through the county, and then they would do it on our behalf through MnDOT, yes.
That's gotta be a nightmare on the snowplows.
It is, and most of the time they are removed in the winter, so that they're removable typically. But I'd be hard pressed to see MnDOT approving them. They really don't deviate from the policies that they have very often. They do, but it's got to be kind of special circumstances from my observations, experience.
Okay. I cut you off. Was there anything else you had?
No, just what was I going to say? Oh yeah, questions about Coventry. We're going to be talking about that on September 9th. So we're going to try to have an all-encompassing question and answer, get the engineers, county, insurance folks all together. They won't be here, but any questions we have, we're going to tap into them to get all the answers. It's up to city council regarding action, and how we want to proceed, but we'll make sure that we give it the time that it needs to move on. So, and it's gonna be, it's gonna be a conversation likely for a while, because this isn't gonna happen until 2021, and we're in 2019. So, you know, that project will be done, by then. If it is opened, you always have the option to close it, so.
Do you have any thoughts in regards to a personnel budget committee meeting needed to go into our enterprise funds, or do you have that scheduled as of yet?
For the enterprise funds scheduled, not yet. We'll look at that after the prelim levy's adopted. We're kind of all hands on deck doing the general fund levy, but likely October, November, working on the enterprise. The enterprise funds are a little bit easier because they're funded through rates, and really we focus on the rate discussion and what the needs are. And the water supply plan study that we're working that we have SEH working on, we should have some results back from that by that time, and be able to incorporate that into conversations. So look for personnel and budget, unless something happens with the general levy, to the next one probably to be maybe the end of September for some personnel things, and then October, November for budget.
Okay, one more time around, does anybody have anything else? I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So,
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.